This is a woodland critique of the woodlands at the Old Rectory. The Old Rectory is a historical site situated in Drumquin, Northern Ireland. The woodland is a mixed ashwood, which is a priority habitat in Northern Ireland, but it has been colonised by sycamore, beech, horse chestnut and other things such as laurel and rhododendron and some other non-native and invasive species. The overall size of the woodland is just little over 2 hectares, and only 1.6 hectares of that is currently being managed, of which that has only begun in the last 2 years. And of that 1.6 hectares, 0.5 has been designated as an ancient woodland under pause. Research has shown that small woodlands like this are very important for biodiversity and ecosystem services. However, it is so small that it is also classified as being very vulnerable to change. The woodland is being managed for private conservational and sustainability reasons, so it is not for profit. The main objectives are to both increase biodiversity and sustainability of the property overall using the woodlands, both for agroforestry and heating of the listed building which is currently on the property. It is also to restore the woodlands, especially the ancient woodlands, to remove the non-native species and the invasive species, and to overall improve the health and biodiversity of the woodland here. To the north-northwest, the stand is dominated by mature veteran beech trees and is underscored by dense holly. The density of the beech canopy has caused this woodland to mimic some of the traits of a W12 and W14 woodland. The further north you go, the less planted species that we see. We see a more ash dominant woodland, and ivy and holly are there less. And to the west, holly dominates less and was replaced by hawthorn, blackthorn, elder and guelder rose. One of my most favourite trees, elder. Where there are breaks in the beech canopy and where holly is absent, wood anemone, periwinkle, bluebells, wild primrose and dog's mercury are carpeting the woodland floor. There are also some areas of blackcurrant and redcurrant, which are either a wild variety or a historical cultivar which were introduced to the woodland. The dominance of beech as a result of this property's historical management as a glebe, which was cultivated for produce but also was a designed landscape. As mentioned earlier, the aims and objectives of the management of the Old Rectory are firstly to increase biodiversity and secondly to increase sustainability. In order to do this, there are a number of objectives. The first is the undertaking of the restoration of the planted ancient woodland. That currently involves removing non-native species and invasive species, some of which has already been done, and there is already evidence of natural regeneration taking place within the woodland. In one area where rhododendron was cleared, aspen seedlings are now coming through, which is a positive sign. Aspen obviously is a pioneer species similar to birch, and it is doing very well on this property. There's quite a number of aspen trees, so it is a very positive sign to see that taking place. Now, to qualify properly as a mixed ashwood, that the canopy needs to be composed of 50% or more of site native trees or shrubs, and that is currently not being met. But again, bearing in mind that the property is only in its second year of management, there are positive moves towards that, with the removal of invasive species, the laurel, the rhododendron, and some horse chestnut and beech. Alongside the planted ancient woodland restoration, there are other aspects going on in the management plan, including a timber biofuel system. non-timber forest products through a forest garden, and non-timber forest products through the harvesting and growing of animal fodders. It is, of course, a bit of a multifaceted management, and it is, again, all of this is incorporated into the overall sustainability of this property. The biofuel system is just as simple as it sounds. Whenever non-native trees are felled, some dead wood is left, but the rest of it gets cut up and dried out on site and burned in the gasifier, which is in the property. This is a great way of sustainably heating and preserving this historical building. Finally, the idea of a forest garden is something that is mentioned in the management of this property. Already there are raspberries, strawberries, black currants, red currants growing in the woodland, and other edible species of native plant that can be used for developing a sustainable food source that exists in a woodland. And this is going to feature quite heavily in how the ancient woodland is restored. So there's going to be more of a focus on planting edible tree species which are native but can contribute food sources for both wildlife and humans. So hawthorn, elder, dog rose, hazel, those type of species which are native but are also edible. What this also conveys, however, is that the management of this property is going right into even areas that are very often neglected, such as the woodland edges, which are very important for biodiversity, and in this case they are being looked at as a place where biodiversity and sustainability can meet, which again is what the whole management of this woodland is about. So now you have a good understanding of what the aims and objectives of this woodland are. How does the site itself compare to those? Bearing in mind, however, that this is only in its second year of management. So the current state of the woodland represents a lot of stuff that still needs to be done, which is acknowledged. However, there are areas, of course, where things have not been brought into consideration, which also can be discussed. There are a number of aspects that could be incorporated into this management that could increase biodiversity, particularly in the management of the ancient woodland. The first one is the lack of drainage in the part of the woodland to the west, which is a long corridor between the main road and the river. The ground is very boggy in this area, and I believe that it is inhibiting some of the diversity we could see coming through on the flora and fauna. And right now, that's currently dominated by creeping buttercup, which you typically get on very boggy ground. So it'll be very interesting to see that if those drains, the historical drains that we can see in the maps, if they were dug out or restored, or if new drainage was put in, if that can improve and make an improvement to the biodiversity of the wood. Another issue is that of ash dieback. It hasn't reached this area, but it is about a county away, which is probably roughly about 15 miles. It should be thought about. Finally, another issue that I can see going forward is going to be with the management of Gunnera Tintoria, because it is coming up the river and is on both sides of the river. So this is going to require collaboration with other landowners in order to eradicate this invasive species. It's not just a matter of the landowner currently managing it on their own property, but there needs to be a more collective response. It is a shame that this ancient woodland was neglected for so many years, but it is absolutely wonderful that it is now being managed and a lot of work is starting to go into it. Ancient woodlands are very rare in Northern Ireland, where there's already reduced amount of woodland, so it is very important that it is managed and preserved and improved for the wider biodiversity of this area. here. And a tunnel with a sort of bridge that goes over along the top of it. For such a small woodland, there is a lot going on. There is no area that is the same. Woodland edges meet agricultural land, the river, a stream flows through one part, the south sloping hill, and even the historical orchard all bring something different to where this woodland meets other environments. For this reason, there are many different habitats in one place through which a range of wildlife, plants and animals have been allowed to live. And hopefully, with the aims and objectives of woodland restoration alongside conservational and sustainability objectives, this woodland will only get better.